A world-famous archaeologist entered the empty quarter in Arabia to uncover a lost civilization buried beneath centuries of sand. But what he found wasn't treasure. It was a prison sealed by God himself for a people cursed in the Qur'an. Strange whispers in unknown languages, visions of giants in chains, and a mummy that began to move after 300 years. This discovery didn't just change history, it changed his faith. He came to find the past, but instead, he found Islam. Watch the full story of Dr. Edward Farrow, the archaeologist who saw the truth. Mosque only on Deeninminute. Don't scroll away. Some truths are meant to find you. If you believe in signs from Allah, this is one you can't ignore. Subscribe to Deeninminute for more life-changing Islamic stories. Drop a red heart if this story moved you. Share this video to awaken someone's heart. The archaeologist who saw the Quran come to life in the desert. The desert was silent, except for the moaning wind that swept over the ancient ruins. Dr. Edward Farrow, an archaeologist renowned for his groundbreaking discoveries, stood at the edge of a partially unearthed burial site, his eyes squinting beneath his dust-covered hat. He had spent over 2 decades chasing fragments of lost civilizations, mapping forgotten dynasties, and excavating tombs whose very whispers terrified the local tribes. But nothing, not even his nights alone with pharaohs and forgotten gods, could prepare him for what lay beneath the sands of Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter. It was a rumor that led him here, a tale passed down from Bedouin guides, a tomb sealed not with stone, but with something else, something cursed, something divine. The desert folk called it Qabr al-Mudhar, the forbidden grave. The story was riddled with folklore, a place where time stopped, where those who entered either disappeared or emerged mad. Edward was a man of reason, logic, carbon dating, stratigraphy. He didn't believe in curses, but he did believe in lost history, and this site, barely marked in any ancient text except a few fragmented manuscripts in Istanbul and Cairo, screamed importance. With a small crew of local workers and 2 assistants, Sarah, a brilliant linguist, and Hamid, a quiet Jordanian geologist, Edward began the excavation. For days they brushed sand and unearthed shards, pottery, and finally a dome-shaped structure beneath the dunes. Then something strange happened. Every morning, the sand that had been cleared the previous day returned, as if the desert itself rejected the exposure. The workers began murmuring about jinn and evil. One by one, they left. "Doctor," Hamid said cautiously one night, his face lit only by the fire's flicker. "There are verses in the Quran about a people destroyed by wind. The people of Idi. Their city was called Iram. Some scholars believe it's here, under this sand." Edward looked up sharply. "Iram? That mythical city?" Hamid nodded. "The Quran mentions it. Iram dat Alimad, the city of lofty pillars. Allah destroyed them with a storm unlike any other." Edward's heart raced. He remembered hearing of Iram before, sometimes compared to Atlantis. He had read the Quranic reference once, dismissed it as poetic metaphor. But now, that night, the desert changed. A storm rose, not a regular one, but a violent, howling, choking wind. The tents flapped, ropes snapped, and Edward felt the air thicken like smoke. He thought he heard voices in the wind, reciting, chanting in a tongue he didn't know. But Hamid whispered, terrified, "It's Quran. It's Surah al-Haqqa." The next morning, the site had collapsed further, revealing a stone slab with inscriptions. Not hieroglyphs, not Aramaic, something older. Sarah trembled as she tried to translate. Her hand shook. "It's not just a tomb. It's a prison." Edward laughed. "A prison? For what?" "A cursed king." She didn't answer. Instead, she pointed at a line that read, "Sealed by the command of the Lord of the worlds, not to be opened until the appointed hour." But Edward had seen such warnings before. Always superstition, always exaggerated. He ordered the slab lifted. As the stone was pried off, an awful groaning came from beneath. The air filled with a stench that smelled like death, rot, and something older, something not of this earth. The sunlight bent unnaturally around the pit, casting shadows that moved on their own. Inside was a mummified figure, not wrapped in linen, but embedded in what looked like ancient salt or crystal, as if it had been preserved by divine intervention. Its face was contorted in terror. Not fear, terror. As Edward approached, he felt his chest tighten. An invisible pressure bore down on him. His ears rang, and he heard whispers again, whispers calling his name in tongues he had never studied. Hamid collapsed, eyes wide, mumbling, "Azab, Azab, punishment, this is punishment." Edward staggered back, trying to breathe, but the pit seemed to pull the oxygen from the air. Then came the first true horror. Sarah screamed. Her eyes were fixed on the pit. The mummy's fingers twitched. Slowly, then more. Edward thought he was hallucinating, but the salt began to crack, and a faint moan echoed from within. Hamid, through his terror, shouted a verse from the Qur'an. He recited Ayat al-Kursi, the verse of the throne. The moment he did, the entire pit groaned, and a gust of wind shot upward, throwing everyone off their feet. The mummy's motion ceased. Sarah wept in shock. Hamid was pale as death. "This is not a tomb. This is the punishment of a people who defied God," Hamid whispered. They were not just destroyed, they were locked away. Edward was no longer sure what to believe. That night, he found an old Qur'an in Hamid's tent and began reading. Surah Al-Far, verse 6. "Have you not seen how your Lord dealt with Iram of the pillars, the like of which was not created in the lands?" It hit him like a blow. This was not metaphor. This was real. The Qur'an was recounting history that he had spent his life trying to unearth. The following days were worse. The crew's generator stopped working, though there was no mechanical issue. Camera footage from the site showed shadows moving in unnatural ways. Sarah became ill. Her dreams were filled with burning cities and giants chained beneath mountains. Hamid began praying constantly, warning Edward, "We've crossed the line. We disturbed what Allah said." But Edward couldn't stop. He needed answers. One night, unable to sleep, Edward returned alone to the pit. The stars overhead shimmered like lights. The wind was still. He stood on the edge and whispered, "Who were you?" And then he saw it. A vision, not a dream, but a waking nightmare, rose from the pit. He was standing in a city of gold and pillars that reached the sky. Men as tall as trees marched in. They laughed at the sky, boasting their might. Their king sat on the throne of emerald, declaring himself God. Then the wind came. It wasn't a storm, it was a scream. A punishment. Angels shaped like light and storm. The city crumbled. The people tried to flee, but were chained by invisible hands. They begged, but no one heard. Then Edward saw himself, watching it all, unable to move. When he awoke, the sand was over his boots. Hours had passed. He broke down, not from fear, but realization. The truth was here. Islam wasn't just a religion, it was a map. A record of truth written long before science caught up. He went to Hamid, tears falling freely. "I saw them," he whispered. "They were real. Everything. The punishment, the angels, the pride." Hamid embraced him, overwhelmed. Edward asked, "Teach me. Tell me about your God." Days later, under the merciless sun, Edward Pharaoh took Shahida, declaring, "Ashhadu an la ilaha illa Allah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah." His voice cracked, but his heart was firm. He changed his name to Isa Farouk. He dismantled the site, left warning markers, donated his research anonymously. Years passed. Isa became a lecturer, not of archaeology, but of the miraculous truth in the Qur'an. He spoke of cities lost, nations punished, and the mercy of Allah. He never sought fame again, but some nights, in the deep silence of the desert, he still heard the wind, and when it whispered, it no longer terrified him. It reminded him that truth was never buried. If this story moved your heart, remember that the signs of Allah are everywhere, waiting to be discovered, not in ruins, but in reflection. Share this story. Subscribe to Deen in Minute for more real-life, inspired Islamic stories that awaken the soul.